if we remember to look up and move forward in reaching out to somebody else and helping somebody else, enlightening somebody else's load, that's one of the best things we can do, both for them and also for us, to lift our mood and help us to feel better.
Hey guys, it's Seth, and welcome to another episode of Look Up and Move Forward, a show of conversations that I have with Carrie M. Wrigley, a licensed therapist and a good friend of mine. Now, the purpose of this show is to inspire and motivate people to move forward with practical ways in which we can all move forward. And to that end, I think this episode is particularly helpful. Hey, so we're back with another episode of Look Up and Move Forward. And Carrie, how have you been? How are things going lately?
Well, some things are really good and some things aren't so fantastic. That's probably about the same for all of us.
Yeah.
You know, and it's really struck me this week how different our challenges are. You know, I've heard a quotation a number of years ago that as we're dealing with other people, we probably want to make it a point to be kind and to be patient because they're probably going through something really hard. And if we treat them that way, you know, then most likely we'll be proved right. They are going through something really hard. Well, I think that's always been true, but I think it's never been more true than now. You know, we're all facing such a different version of what's going on. The seniors, the children, the teenagers, the college-age students, the young parents, the middle-aged parents, the older people whose kids left. You know, for each of us, the version is just a little bit different. But again, we're really smart to treat everybody as if they're going through a hard time because they probably are. Yeah. And it's probably different than the version that we're going through. You know, and I had a really sweet experience over the weekend because it was one of those times when I was feeling really underwhelmed and I had a few more clients cancel and a few more things fall through and a few more reasons that I wasn't going to be as busy as I hoped at different things. And two of my daughters ended up coming over this weekend. One of them is a musician who was not able to work for the longest time. And now all of a sudden it's beautiful October here in Utah. And, you know, there's all these fall gatherings and pre-Halloween parties and stuff. And throw caution to the winds, people are just sick of staying home and doing nothing. And so they're being hired like crazy. And so she's busier than she's ever been now, even though she wasn't before. And so finding any time with her has been really hard. And then my other little daughter, like I say, she has two little tiny kids, and they ended up coming over, and she just started working again to try to help and make ends meet in this, you know, crazy busy time. And so she was over with her two little kids, and like I say, as I was hearing about their busy life, I was actually kind of really, really tempted to feel sorry for myself because it's like, oh, I remember when people wanted me to perform, and oh, I remember when the kids needed me, and oh, I remember when, you know. And I'm not that old, right? You know, I'm by no means an 80-year-old woman sitting in my rocking chair with nothing at all to do. But I was just feeling a little bit, you know, sad and sorry for myself and whatever, just kind of a little bit down hearing about other stuff, partly because it made it hard for me to find time with them, you know. And then it so happened that my daughter with the two kids stayed around and talked to my husband for a little while. So her little kids were, you know, wandering around my backyard. And so like, hey kids, let's go pick grandma's tomatoes. And so we've got, you know, a little 3-year-old boy, a little 18-month-old girl. The 3-year-old has a pretty good sense of what tomatoes you pick. They're supposed to be red. The little one, not so much. You know?
Yeah.
But we go wandering over my little square foot garden, and, you know, they know the rig. They've done it before with grandma. They're reaching in, they're finding, you know, Isaac's finding all the perfect little, you know, red and orange, you know, little tiny cherry tomatoes and dropping them in the bowl. And sometimes he has to really reach in, and sometimes he's like, Grandma, it's too far. And, you know, so I had to use my longer arm to get it. And little Leah, of course, she's picking all the green ones alongside. I'm like, no, Leah. So we finally would sort of pick some of the red tomatoes and put them in her hand so she could have the joy of dumping them into grandma's, you know, basket. And about 5 minutes into that experience with my little grandkids, all of a sudden I realized my dark mood is gone. And like, it felt like a miracle to me because it was really a pretty downer morning. I felt really, you know, pretty more despondent than I've been in a long time. But all of a sudden, just with that, picking cherries with my little grandkids and giving them the joy of accomplishing something and spending the time with them, my mood just lifted, And I think it was several things. I think, first of all, even though it was a dark day, just reaching and looking for those little teeny tiny good things on my scratchy vines, finding those little tiny, tomatoes and just plop, plop, one at a time, gathering the things that were good, together with that experience of sharing it with my little grandkids and seeing their faces light up and bringing them joy and being able to give some of that to their busy mom to take home with her to lighten her load just a little bit. They left and I felt a million times better, and that million times better has stayed with me. And it was just another lesson that, when we're kind of feeling off or down or anxious or whatever, it was two of the best things we can do are, again, look for the good things, which we've talked about previously in this podcast. And secondly, this one I think is a new idea, to look for who else we can reach out to, whose burden we can lift, who we can serve, who we can help, who we can share our resources with.
One of the things I learned a while ago when dealing with my depression was sort of this remarkable difference between the natural man, or else the natural inclination of a person, and
mode, sure.
yeah, and I guess a spiritual minded person, or a religious perspective, having a religious perspective, and relying upon God or a creator or a higher power. Very interesting difference, because the natural person, the natural man, when you're feeling depressed, when you're feeling anxious, when you're feeling hurt or wounded, you sort of close into yourself and you want to serve only yourself, and you cut yourself off from other people. You build walls around yourself, protective walls, and you just push other people away. And that's a natural inclination, is to hide from other people and to bury yourself, hide away from social interaction. And when you start to believe in a higher power, a higher source, it's incredible. But in all of the major religions, they'll talk about how God asks you to go out and help other people, and it's not necessarily something for him that he wants you to do. It's something for you, because reaching out and helping other people, being part of a community, lifting other people, it has these hidden benefits for you as well. Like there's this reciprocal nature in service that lifts and inspires and strengthens you as you do it. I mean, there's that quote. I mean, it's been, lots of people have said different variations of it, but basically, I lift thee and thee lift me, and in that way we reach heaven together. It's true. I mean, service is the way forward in so many ways.
Yeah, no, it reminded me of a situation I had a number of years ago with my little sister, who, like all of us at times, was going through a hard time. And she just kind of dropped by and she said, "Hey," she says, "could you talk?" And normally I would drop everything and just talk to her, but it's Utah. And here in Utah, we have every so often big unexpected snowstorms. And when a snowstorm hits and the autumn leaves are still all over the backyard, it's a mess. It's like, months of trying to, lift up muddy, hard, heavy leaves. And so I'm like, under any other circumstances, I would drop everything and do this right now. But as it is, I really need to get these leaves picked up. And then I'd be happy to give you the whole night if you want. She says, "Well, do you have an extra rake?" I'm like, "Sure." She says, "Well, I'll help you. And then we can get done faster. Maybe we can talk." I'm like, "Okay, cool." So I got her an extra rake, and her and me and our little kids, who of course were having fun more than they were actually useful at the time.
Always. Yeah.
We had, at the time, we had like 10 trees outside, literally, loaded like 25 full, big, huge lawn and leaf bags of these stupid leaves. Took us a couple of hours. And sure enough, as we were finishing up, the first little, snowflake started to fall. And I was so grateful to not just have it done, but to have had it done a little bit sooner with her help. And so we were kind of basking in the afterglow of that accomplishment. And I said, so I've got the evening free now, what was it you wanted to talk about? And she's like, you know what? I can't even remember. I don't feel bad anymore. One of the best things you can do to lift yourself out of a negative mood is to do something physical with your hands, like knitting or crocheting or kneading bread, or just something that over and over and over you're doing the same repetitive action. She says, I think raking up all those leaves, like, I don't know, gave me, some adrenaline, or got rid of my cortisol, or, changed the chemicals in my brain or whatever. So I just feel better. And honestly, I don't even need to talk now. Thanks for letting me help. And she left, and she was in a great mood, and it's so weird. And when you're talking before about service, I've seen research, and certainly, like you say, in a religious context, we're always encouraged to serve others, and it serves God to serve our fellow men, and we'll feel good if we do. But I've seen people who are completely, like, not just agnostic, atheistic, whatever, but guess what? You don't have to believe in a religious context for it to work. In a secular context, it's called altruism, like giving to others in ways that don't necessarily directly benefit you. Weirdly, benefits you more than almost anything else, lifts your spirits more than almost anything else. There's been research done about that. I think those of us who are religious get extra benefit out of the experience, because in addition to that, we also feel like our relationship with God is improved and whatever. But even without that, even for people who are completely not religious, altruism, service, reaching out to others, giving benefit to others just simply works, in some very, very powerful ways. And as you said, when we're in a downer state, our natural inclination is just to kind of curl up and just take care of me for a while and just think about my own whatever. And what I've seen, and I think both of us have experienced at times, is after we do that for a while, we start to feel so dark and so poisonous that then it's like, oh, I don't want anyone around me because I'm so poisonous. I don't want to contaminate anyone else with my darkness. Mm-hmm. Not understanding that part of the darkness was self-inflicted because we were busy pulling away, And weirdly, my experience is, even when we get to that state, which in all honesty, I was kind of in this weekend for a while, if in the midst of our loneliness, our darkness, our self little, inflicted cocoon that we put ourselves in those situations sometimes, if in the midst of that, we remember to look up and move forward in reaching out to somebody else, in helping somebody else, in lightening somebody else's load, weirdly, that's one of the best things we can do, both for them and also for us, to lift our mood and to help us to feel better.
I'm not a medical expert. I've never received, a formal training in depression or anxiety or how to cope with those things. I've certainly read a lot on my own. I've listened to a lot of lectures and talks and discussions about those things. And so when I talk about it, I'll have parents or friends or someone, come up to me and say, hey, look, someone I know is really struggling right now, and I don't know what to do for them. And, obviously, because I'm not a medical expert, I cannot give medical advice for their condition. But the best advice as a friend that I could give, as someone, if you're someone who loves someone who's struggling, the best advice that I could give is, hey, just go for a walk with them. Go for a walk with them, make a commitment to go for a walk with them 3 times a week, at least 30 minutes, and talk about things in the future, talk about plans, talk about goals, talk about things you'd like to do. Because the research has shown that going for 30 minutes of a brisk walk, doing an activity like that, like you were saying, some sort of physical activity that's relatively monotonous, going for a walk, it actually reduces those stress chemicals in your body, and in many ways helps reduce depression. And so just going for a walk with a friend, talking about something else that's maybe not related to whatever they're experiencing, just talking about the future, talking about goals, talking about things they'd like to accomplish and do and become, I found that to be the most effective for, myself and for other people, because it shows that you care, it shows that you love, it shows that you see a future for them. And then in the meantime, while you're doing that, while you're performing that, while you're communicating with them, you're actually doing these steps. Their body is moving, they're progressing towards an end goal here, they're progressing towards something, and they're doing it, and it's reducing those stress levels. It's a very simple yet very effective way to move forward.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember a number of years ago, my mother-in-law was going through a really, really hard time with her health. And she was normally a very vibrant, vivacious, extroverted, happy person, made friends wherever she went. And now, her health was such that she was just kind of stuck inside of her house, unable to do anything, unable to go anywhere with anybody. It was a really hard time for her. And it was very tempting, again, for her in that state to sort of fall into a lot of despair, a lot of self-pity, a lot of anger even at her situation. Well, one of the things that I like to do, when I'm trying to figure something out, or when I'm trying to share something with someone else, is put it to music. And as I was thinking about how best to help, she loved music, a song came to me to help her. We're not going to play it here. We'll have it linked to the end of this video if anybody wants to hear the song or see the music video. But I do want to share with you a couple of the lines. We're going to first start with this little image representing a storm, right? And the words go like this. When the sky is dark and the wind is cold, when the rain begins to fall and thunder starts to roll, when the clouds collide and the storm breaks free, sometimes I cynically suppose it only rains on me. But I'm not alone. There are others who are standing on a street where it is raining too. I can cry alone, or I can find a way to lift up love's umbrella on this rainy day. And that basically is the idea that I found to be so helpful for her and also for myself, that when we go through problems, when we go through difficulties, a lot of times we think it's just us. We're the only one who's struggling. We're the only one who's suffering, and it's not fair that I have to go through this, or I have to be deprived of that, or it's not fair that I don't get to do this or that I used to do anymore, or whatever it is. But again, if we just look up and see the faces of other people and allow our hearts to be touched by what's going on for them, we can literally learn how to lift up love's umbrella, opening an umbrella for ourselves that we share with somebody else to be able to bring comfort to them as well as to ourselves.
One of the stories that I love to share is actually illustrated in the image you see behind me. This is a painting that I actually had commissioned, but it's an image I had commissioned of a famous historical individual who lived in Russia at the turn of the century, and he was on his way to prison. This was before he was famous. And as he was going to prison, a stranger came out of the crowd and offered him a gift. And that gift was a New Testament in Russian. It had just been translated into Russian. And inside of it were some rubles for him to survive. It was kind of a labor camp, and he could barter and trade some things while he worked for years in this Siberian prison. And the man who received this gift, he said he was transformed by this gift. I mean, it changed everything for him. And he kept that Bible with him for the rest of his life. He actually slept with it underneath his pillow, and on his deathbed, years and years and years later, his daughter read to him from that Bible. And then he died. And that man, his name is Fyodor Dostoevsky, and he wrote Crime and Punishment, The Brothers Karamazov, and many, many other things. He's a very revered author who eventually went on and inspired many other Russian authors, and those authors inspired many other people, including Mahatma Gandhi, and then Mahatma Gandhi in turn inspired Martin Luther King Jr. And so I actually call this illustration, this painting behind me, I call it The Person Who Changed the World. But it's not about Dostoevsky who changed the world. It's not the individual. It's this anonymous young woman who decided to serve this miserable looking man who had nothing left for him, nothing going for him. This anonymous woman, we don't know who she is, we don't know her name, we don't know anything else about her. She transformed through this act of service. She transformed the future of this prisoner. And this miserable prisoner, she had no idea. He could have been a murderer, he could have been somebody else, but she just changed him through a gift, through a small act of service. And I always think about that, because you never know what your small acts of service can and will do for someone else's life, and indeed the future of the world when you look at it in a much larger context. And that for me has always been a sticking point for staying alive, right? For moving forward. Because I don't personally know what good may come of, moving forward and helping other people in these small acts of service. And for me, that's always been a story that's inspired me to press forward. Even when things seem really dark and dismal, and maybe my future looks like I'm in quarantine in a type of Serbian or Siberian prison, right? There's dark days ahead for sure, but there's also a transformative experience that's ahead, and I think that comes through those acts of service.
Yeah. I think that's such an important point, again, like me picking my little cherries, that on one hand, it's great to notice the good things. On the other hand, there's something about sharing a meaningful experience with somebody else. Both of those things together, are so very powerful in helping us find the light and moving forward. Earlier in the podcast, we shared this image, which you may have noticed is now hanging on my back wall in my office. I've so loved this image, and the more we do this podcast, the more I ponder it, of just this amazing image of a sunrise, and again, there's light spots, there's dark spots. In an earlier podcast, in an earlier episode, I suggest that we think about what different elements of that picture would look like zoomed in. And so I thought it would be fun to kind of experiment with that a little bit. If you look at that lower left-hand corner that is so very, very dark, we talked in a prior podcast about how that is very much like what the media shows us, the very, very darkest little corner of reality. Well, I decided to do my own experiment and to zoom into that. So I want to show you what that looks like. There it is. Beautiful, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's it. And that literally is what depression looks like. That literally is what the view of the world that the media so often gives us looks like. It's bleak, it's formless, it's not a pretty picture. But we also have the option of focusing on other elements of the picture. Here's another element from that picture. And again, the resolution isn't great, but you kind of get the idea, because this is very, very zoomed in. There's that there. That's significantly more balanced, right? It's still got the dark spots, but it's also got the greens and the vibrance of those trees and that running water. And then my favorite element from that picture is this one, that sunrise, that glorious, beautiful sunrise. You put all of that together and it creates this picture, right? And so in whatever situation we are, even if it feels like we're lost in that dark forest and things seem so bleak and so terrible and so hopeless, again, if we look up and we look around, inevitably, we're going to find some elements that are not just all darkness. And so in whatever situation we're in, I hope that we can get in the habit of learning to look to the light. And there's a lot of different dimensions of that light. As you mentioned, there's the dimension of us being kind to each other. There's the dimension of spirituality. There's the dimension of knowing just the cycles of life, that, every dark night is followed by the hope of a new morning. And then, as you mentioned, with this gift that Dostoevsky was given, that spiritual record that we've treasured as the Bible, there are so many nuggets in that work and in other spiritual works that can give us a sense from people in the time when those things were written of how they got through their stuff. This is one of my very favorites. I love this image of this, bleak little tree with a storm around it, with still some rays of light coming around it. I was in a mood that this picture reflects, just, feeling really kind of alone and struggling and looking for light and all that kind of stuff. One time I happened to open up my Bible, and it fell open to this verse that since that time has become one of my very favorites, 2 Corinthians 4, 8-9, which says, "We are troubled on every side." It could have been written yesterday, right? But not distressed. We are perplexed. Again, very relevant. But not in despair. Persecuted, but not forsaken. Cast down, but not destroyed. I think those words are so incredible. We are troubled on every side, yet not distressed. We are perplexed, but not in despair. Persecuted, but not forsaken. Cast down, but not destroyed. And of course, in the time period that Paul was writing this, their problems, we think we have problems having to sit home and watch Netflix and CNN for more hours a day and having our kids home from school. But these people were seeing their loved ones, their fellow believers, thrown into vats of boiling oil and thrown to the lions in the gladiators' den and crucified, including crucified upside down, like some of them, and all these horrific, persecutions and difficulties. It was in that state that Paul wrote those words to his fellow believers: cast down, but not destroyed. And I remember when I ran across that verse on that hard day, I thought to myself, well, that's great, Paul. That's so great that you guys accomplished that you're able to find that kind of strength in the midst of your difficulties. But ultimately, how? How do you do that? How can you be cast down but not destroyed? How can you be, troubled on every side but not overwhelmed by that? Because right now I feel destroyed and I feel overwhelmed and I feel in despair. So how did you guys do that? Well, I literally turned the page. On the very next page, I ran across this series of verses where I think he answers that question. 2 Corinthians 4, 16-18, where he says, "For which cause we faint not." And I realized he's going to give me the answer. This is how he didn't get overwhelmed by all this stuff. For this cause, for these following principles, this is how we don't fall over and die and faint and give up and be overcome by this. This is his recipe. "But though our outward man perish, yet the inward man is renewed day by day." So we can have all kinds of problems on the outside, but on the inside, we can find new hope, new faith, new reasons to live, new service, new compassion, new opportunities every single day, day by day. And then he goes on to say, "For our light affliction, which is but for a moment, worketh for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory." We talked about that a little bit in our last episode, how the problems we go through today, right now, literally are crafting strengths in us, perspective in us, compassion and patience in us that can't be developed in any other way. And then finally he says, "While we look not at the things which are seen, but the things which are not seen. For the things which are seen are temporal, but the things which are not seen are eternal." Now, of course, in Paul's time, the things that were seen did not include what's seen on CNN or NBC or whatever else. It was just what they saw in the natural world. The things that are seen and the things that are publicized are things that can very much bring us down. They're like that little dark corner, again, in that picture. Whereas if all we look at is what's wrong, then we're going to be in despair. We're going to be cast down and we will be destroyed by it. But again, if we look up, and we look around and we see who we can bless, and we can see, how every single day that sun comes up, and every single day, even on the darkest night, there's still at least a few stars, and there's still at least, even if it's the tiniest little crescent moon or smaller, there is light if we look for it. There is hope if we seek it out.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of Look Up and Move Forward. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a 5-star review and share it with your friends and family. Now, there are many, many more episodes on their way, so please be sure to subscribe. And we'll see you next time.